Well, hello. Welcome again to another episode of Deserts to Mountaintops. I am Jess Buchanan, your host. I'm also the founder of Soul Speak Press, a boutique, non-traditional publishing company for women who've been through something, now they know something, and they want to teach us something. I have the immense pleasure of having Amy Mathe on this morning. She's one of our contributing authors for our second volume, our second anthology of Deserts to Mountaintops, Choosing Our Healing Through Radical Self-Acceptance. Amy wrote a chapter called Beautiful, and I am so happy to have her here today. I'll stop talking about you in third person. Amy, hi, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Um, so fun fact, Amy's actually my sister.
Yes.
Yeah, and I feel like people should know that, or that they do know that, but
Yeah.
it's funny, I got a really lovely email just yesterday because at the time of this recording, the book was launched about a week ago. And so women are reading it, they're like devouring it, they're giving us all kinds of feedback, they're leaving reviews. It's been awesome. But one woman in particular took time to email me and say how much your chapter moved her and it resonated with her. And she said she started bawling and she was going to go back and
Mm.
read it again that night. And so I knew this. Well, it's so funny because then I wrote her back because she wanted to know if it would be okay if she got in touch with you. And I was like, I'm pretty sure it's okay. And also, fun fact, she's my sister and she like that blew her mind. She was just
Oh,
like, "Oh my goodness." So I was so excited. I'm so excited for that connection to happen to one of your
mm,
readers.
I love
Uh,
that.
so why don't you, if you don't mind, go back and tell us a little bit about realizing the desert is not just one moment.
Hmm.
It can span many, many years, but let's talk a little bit about that desert and what you chose to write about in the anthology.
Sure. Well, I really focused in working on this chapter on the diagnosis that I received. I guess it's been about 5 or 6 years ago now, um, of vestibular migraine. And so the chapter is really just sort of getting into, how that manifested for me. Um, it just seemed like it came out of nowhere. I just started
Mhm.
having these really weird, vague symptoms, and then they became more and more pronounced over time. So the chapter really focuses in on that, but it's also, really about how, pushed off so many of us can feel. And I think,
Yes.
especially as women, just feeling like we cannot get the attention and the care that we deserve. um, you know, I went to so many doctors. I tried so many different avenues to try to get to the root of whatever was happening, just to get a diagnosis, just to
Mhm.
get help and support. And I felt really pushed aside for
Right.
a long time. And, as I'm hearing from people and sort of learning about other people's stories, I'm realizing how common that is, especially for women,
Mhm.
but also that some people go for years and years with symptoms like mine, or other types of symptoms without a diagnosis. I think the lovely woman that you were just referring to said that she had dealt with her symptoms for like something like 10 years, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. Yeah. A
Yeah,
decade
without
before she found
having,
out what she had.
it's just, I can't even imagine, because it took me a year to get diagnosed and then another year to have any type of real difference with my symptoms, because of just trying to figure out a treatment plan, because it's just so different for everyone. um
Can
I just can't
ask a
imagine.
quick question? What is vestibular migraine? In case somebody comes
Yeah.
across this episode and perhaps they've been having similar
Yeah.
symptoms.
Yeah. Well, so it's a neurological disorder, really, a migraine disorder. But I think the reason that vestibular migraine is so difficult to diagnose is because most people that experience vestibular migraine do not have like the headaches. They may have
Okay.
the like sort of typical migraine at other points, which I have had. where you sort of get like the auras and then that onset of the really bad pain. And then for me, after that, I usually get sick to my stomach, and it's, just obviously not a pleasant thing. So I had experienced like a typical migraine before, but never thought that what I was experiencing was a migraine, because they call it a silent headache, because you're not really experiencing the headache. Although I did feel often like a lot of head pressure and like the feeling of throbbing without the pain, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But for me, it was mostly really, really intense brain fog and just a dizziness that was constant. So I think what happens for a lot of people is you have episodic migraine, vestibular migraine. So you'll have like episodes of dizziness, and then it goes away and you're like, okay, well, I'm fine.
Kind of
But
like vertigo or something.
right, just think they have vertigo. But the
Okay.
thing with vertigo is a symptom. It's really not a diagnosis. But doctors sort of hand it out like it's a diagnosis. But if
Okay.
you're dealing with vertigo, there's usually something, there's something causing it.
Okay.
So for me, just getting that diagnosis was everything, because I had no idea that I had a migraine. And what happens is it turns from episodic to chronic. And that's what had happened for me pretty quickly. So
Okay.
chronic was like no break. So I was just dizzy for 2 years
Oh my
without
God, I
any
can't
breaks. And then
imagine.
it started to subside, but it wasn't over, within 2 years. It took
Mm.
really more like 3 to feel like myself again.
Oh my God.
So,
And
yeah.
as your sister, I have
Mhm.
been on the outside looking in, and tried to be like as much of an emotional support as I could possibly be. But watching you struggle, and I think it bears mentioning that you have 2 small children, you were pregnant with your second
Yeah.
through this whole experience. So I can't imagine how difficult that must have been,
Hmm.
to deal with like constant dizziness.
Hmm.
And when you got 2 small children that you're caring for and you're trying to work.
Yeah. Yeah. It was really hard. It was really hard. You and I mean, of course, I'm not just saying this because we're doing a podcast. You and my husband, Andy, were the only people that really knew how bad it was, how bad I felt, and that I felt like I could, just let you see all of me, I guess. And I
Mhm.
knew I was totally safe and totally supported. It
Mhm.
was just so hard to explain because, I had a very close friend at work, and I had close friends outside of work, and people that I, knew really cared about me. But, you're at work. So you're just trying to get through the day
Yeah.
without crying. And it was like once I started, I was never going to stop. So there were just a lot of days that I faked it, and I felt miserable, but it's silent, people, it's that invisible illness, chronic illness so often
Yes.
is,
Mhm.
people don't see it, so they can't really conceptualize it. And a lot of times, unfortunately, like with some of the doctors that I experienced, they don't think it's real, or they think
Yeah.
you just have, they think you have anxiety, which of course you're going to have some
Sure.
anxiety, but for me, it wasn't the root cause. It wasn't what was causing,
Right.
my symptoms. So
So what caused it? Do you know?
I, I don't really know, honestly. I can look back and see that about a year or two before that was really stressful. I was really exhausted, not taking care of myself in a lot of ways that I should have been. Um, I think another thing that really contributed was I was experiencing rebound headaches, but I didn't know that. I didn't know what they were. So I woke up every morning with like a slight headache, and I took ibuprofen, and that probably really created like the onset of the vestibular migraine. Um, because a rebound headache is just when you like treat it and it comes back and you can't really get rid of it without treating it with something. And so then you're always kind of adding more medication or caffeine or whatever, and it's kind of fuel to the fire. So I think that definitely contributed. And then it's also hereditary for a lot of people.
Wow.
But as you know, our family history, I don't really know of anyone that struggled with
Mhm.
this. So They say like for small children that have really bad motion sickness,
Ugh,
that can be an indicator. So that's
me
something
so
that,
much because my Ebba,
yeah,
she
I know.
it's really motion sick. I'm
Yeah,
like, okay, well, by the time she reaches adulthood, surely they'll have figured something out, right?
absolutely. I mean, we know so much more than we
Yeah,
did even when I was
like
diagnosed.
3 years
And there's
ago. Yeah.
so many different treatments and medications that are really effective. So, but yeah, I think, I did have really terrible motion sickness as a
Mhm.
kid. So I do
Yes,
think
I
that,
was the recipient of
yes, quite literally.
I'm really
Oh
good at
gosh,
catching barf.
I hadn't thought about that in so many years. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I did that to you.
Couldn't help it. We're like 6. You got an older sister for
Oh
a
my
reason.
gosh. You've been there literally from day one.
All right, so let's like traverse then. Let's pivot. Let's go up. Like, what would you consider your mountaintop to be?
Mm. Oh gosh. The most simple days. Oh, I'm getting emotional. The most simple days at home with
Hmm.
my kids when it was like you could see, I think I think in the chapter I sort of alluded to this. It's sort of like seeing the sun start to coming through the clouds,
Yeah. Yeah.
and just like the sunlight started streaming in a little bit. And that's how it felt once the medication started working. And I finally, started feeling it was like I would have longer stretches where I felt good during the day.
Hmm.
And that would start happening, more consistently. And just being able to be home with my kids and enjoying them, not thinking, about the symptoms I was having and trying to push those aside so I could try to be present, but just being able to naturally be present with them,
Hmm.
and just so thankful. And especially at that point, my daughter was a newborn, so I was able to enjoy her a little
Yeah.
bit finally, and,
Yeah.
just be able to, yeah, be present with my kids, my family.
That's beautiful. I know. Oftentimes we think the mountaintop needs to be like some big,
Yeah.
huge accomplishment,
Yes.
and we don't give recognition and take pause to really stand in awe of the seemingly normal
Hmm.
moments that really are the mountaintop.
They really are. When
Yeah.
you're really
That.
sick, you just think about how much you want your old life back
Yes.
and how thankful you
Yes.
should have been for it, and how
Yes.
thankful you will be if you get to experience it again, which
Yeah.
and on a whole different level.
Yeah. Get that
So
though.
I think, yeah, that perspective, that was a real perspective change shift
Hmm.
for me.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I feel that oftentimes, like whenever, especially like around exercise and stuff, like, I like to exercise and I like to move. I'm kind of like I'm not a peaceful person, if you will. And anytime I like feel like, ugh, I don't want to go out and take a walk.
Yeah.
I think back to the 93 days,
Yeah.
where I was sequestered to a mat under a
Right.
tree, where
Yeah.
I couldn't move freely. And that gives me the kick I need, right? To
Yeah.
get out and take care of myself and,
Yeah.
all of that. So I really do believe that the gift in the breakdown is the breakthrough, right? It is that perspective
Yeah.
shift because it will, if you let it,
Hmm.
it'll take your life on a whole different trajectory.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's
Um,
really true.
and I see that in you. So,
Mm.
okay, I have 2 other questions I want to ask. One is about the writing process and what that's been like for you. And then 2, I want to know like what your plans are, like what's
Okay.
next. So,
Okay.
however you want to do that.
Okay. I'll start with the writing process. Writing has never really been my thing. I've never really engaged with it as like a creative outlet. So I honestly, and I don't say this in like a self-defeating way, I just at the beginning really didn't know if I could do this because I've never really written very much
Why'd
before.
you decide to do it then? Because I hassled you?
To get you off my back. No, no, definitely not. I think I just knew, well, first you start thinking how healthy this will be, for me to kind of process through it.
Mhm.
But also, this is sort of a vague illness. And I think a lot of people are probably struggling with it and have no idea what they have.
Mhm.
So it probably sounds cheesy, but I mean it, like if somebody can be helped and not have to go through, you know, gosh, just wondering what's
Yeah.
wrong with you and going through all these tests. And, if you can narrow that down, that is amazing,
That's not
just
cheesy.
try
That's the
to,
whole point of the
yeah,
book.
yeah, yeah. I don't want to be like, well, to help someone, but I mean, it's to
But
help
it is.
someone.
It's to help
Yeah.
someone. Okay.
I wanted that. So I hope that it does. But the writing process it was hard, absolutely, but in some ways easier than what I expected, because I think it starts to flow when you get into that
Mhm.
process, because you're writing about something that really intimately well.
Mhm.
And I didn't know how much I needed it. It was so healing for me. It was really healing for me to express how much it all hurt and how difficult it was, and for people that I didn't feel like I could maybe share it with at the time, because I just didn't know how. um I could share it now, and that was really validating on a
Mhm.
lot of levels for me. So
Did anybody come to you and say, like, wow, I had no idea how bad it was?
yeah, yeah, several people, really close friends, and even our dad,
Mhm.
he read it, and I mean, he was very supportive at the time, and he knew I wasn't doing well, but yeah, after he read the chapter, he just looked at me and he was like, I am so sorry. I had no idea how bad it was. I think you're just, a lot of times when you're with people and seeing people and spending time with them, you're just trying so hard to be in the moment and not think about how you're feeling. I almost feel like I disassociated sometimes. So I just really didn't talk about it very much.
Yeah. Now, you have brought up to me in conversation something that I think is interesting, and I wonder if other writers that I've worked with have felt this, but haven't mentioned it. You said something about like there was this fear that if you were going to spend
Mm,
all this time thinking about it again, that it was
yeah.
like the symptoms were going to come back. Did I get that
Yes,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that was a definite fear. It was like, I've spent all this time trying to not think about this, not focus on it, focus on other things in my life, because I do still have episodic,
Hmm.
vestibular migraine. It probably, you can go into remission, but like, are you ever really cured? Probably not.
Hmm.
And in the middle of the writing process, I did have a really bad flare up, and I don't really know what caused it. And it went on for a couple of months. And, I had a few moments where I was like, oh no, maybe it doesn't really make sense, but it's just sort of that fear of like opening yourself back up to it in
Hmm.
some way. So I think honestly that was probably one of the most significant parts, though, because I faced it. I faced the fear. I did have a flare up, and
Yeah.
I got through it, and I got to the other side of it, and I completed this goal. And so it really did make me feel like okay, I faced this fear. And if it happens again, I'll get through it, you
Hmm.
know? I have more tools now than I had before, I think.
It's just so interesting to be able to like view um an episode or a flare up through that lens,
Yeah.
and perhaps seeing writing as a tool to
Yeah.
have gotten you through that.
Yeah. Like a coping skill, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love that because writing is my coping skill. Like
Yeah.
when I don't know what to do, what to think, I write
Uh,
to know what I'm thinking. Someone famous
oh,
said
wow.
that or said
Yeah.
that once, but and I saw that and I was like, yes, that's exactly like
Yeah.
so. Um, I love hearing that from other people. that you
Yeah.
have been able to like experience that, because
Yeah.
I think it's one of the greatest gifts of being a human.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell
That's
us what you're
awesome.
up to now and what your, what your plans are. What's the haps, and how can people connect with you?
Okay. Well, you can find me. Probably the best spot is on Instagram at Pain Pathway. That's where I focus a little bit more on the coaching that I do.
Mhm.
So I am a behavioral coach for a company. I do that part time right now, and I'm getting ready to start a certification program, which I'm excited about,
Yep.
nervous, but excited. So by the end of that, I'll be a nationally board certified health and wellness coach. And at that point, I'd really like to start taking on some more clients outside of the work that I'm doing for this organization and do some things a little bit more independently. So that's what
Amazing.
I'm
So
hoping
if
for.
anybody who's dealing with vestibular migraine or, something similar reaches out to you, you're there to help.
Absolutely. Yes. Please reach out. I would love to talk to you. And, there's just so many good resources. I can point you in other directions and listen. I am happy to do that. So,
Yeah. Amy's been a counselor for like 20 years, and literally she's the best listener ever. So
thank
I get to
you.
personally benefit from that.
You're pretty
Oh,
good too.
well, Amy, you're a gift to me and to the
Oh,
world. Thank you so
thank
much
you.
for doing something big and scary and
Mhm.
putting this out there. It is, I believe, I always say that these writing our experiences is a very generous contribution.
Mm.
And I believe that the women who need to read it and connect with you will find you and find your story. So
Mhm.
thank you
Thank
for
you.
trusting Soul Speak Press and me with that.
Well, thank you. I never would have done this without you, honestly. So thank you for the opportunity and all of the
Yeah.
support from the beginning, even when I was car sick as a
I know
child.
this is kind of like a full circle moment.
Yeah, right.
I love
Who would
it.
have known on that school bus that day?
Here we are. Well, I'll catch your barf anytime.
Likewise.